Welcome to A Dad's Path, where we navigate the heart and science of parenting. Each episode, we tackle issues that dads everywhere face and deliver actions you can take right away. Join us as we uncover the balancing act of raising resilient, loving kids. Visit us at adadspath.com to learn more. Ready for the journey? Let's begin. Welcome to A Dad's Path, where we navigate the heart and science of parenting. Each episode, we tackle issues that dads everywhere face and deliver actions you can take right away. Join us as we uncover the balancing act of raising resilient, loving kids. Visit us at adadspath.com to learn more. Ready for the journey? Let's begin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Dad's Path podcast. I'm Will Braunstein. Today we're here with Margot Bisnow. She's a fascinating woman. She spent 20 years in government, including as an FTC Commissioner and Staff Director of the President Council's Economic Advisors. For the last 10 years, she's spoken to parent groups about raising creative, confident, resilient children who achieve their dreams. And I think that's a goal for all of us listeners here. So excited to dig deeper on that. She served as an advisor to the EQ Generation, which is an after-school program in New York City that gives children the skills they need to succeed, on the advisory board of the Muse School in Malibu that prepares young people to live consciously through passion-based learning, and on the board of Spark the Journey in Washington, D.C. that mentors low-income high school students to achieve college and career success. Her new book is Raising an Entrepreneur: How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams, 99 Stories from Families Who Did, and you can learn more at raisinganentrepreneur.com. You can see the book right there. And welcome, Margot. Excited to have this conversation.
Me too. Very, very much looking forward to it, Will.
Awesome. So yeah, just to dive in, why did you write this book?
As I think you know, my older son, Elliot, started an organization called Summit, which was conferences of young entrepreneurs. And I was so curious why someone became an entrepreneur. And I used to go up and ask them. And everybody told me the same thing. They said, there was someone who believed in me. There was someone who's told me I could do anything that I put my mind to and that I worked at hard enough. And generally, this was someone in their family, not always, but generally. And I was so struck by this, and I just kept talking about it. And the kids started saying, you have to write a book. And I said, I can't write a book. And they said, no, you have to write a book. And so this went on for a while, and finally they wore me down. And so I just decided to do it. And I just decided to cast the broadest net I could. So it's half men, half women. I wanted every race, religion, socioeconomic background, born in the U.S., born of immigrant parents, born overseas, small town, big city, small families, big families, single moms, divorced, nuclear families, everything. And to my amazement, they were all basically raised the same. And every single one of these people, just like the people I'd talked to at these summit conferences, said the same thing to me. They said, I had someone who believed in me.
That's fascinating. No, we're going to dive in onto what some of those traits are, et cetera. But I love the way the book's laid out with there's sort of interviews, a lot of interviews, but very short. So it's very readable, and you can kind of just take pieces at a time, and but delivers the overall message really, really well. So
thank you.
It's just a great book. And but yeah, I'd be curious, how, you've talked to a lot of people, you've been around entrepreneurs a ton, obviously. How would you define an entrepreneur? Like, when you hear that word, what does that mean to you?
Yes, an entrepreneur is anyone who starts anything. So my younger son, who I know you've met, Austin, is a musician. So he's an entrepreneur. He started a band. That's very entrepreneurial. That's not like joining somebody's, choir or band or orchestra or something. An actor is an entrepreneur. An activist is an entrepreneur. Someone who starts a project in somebody else's larger company or organization is an entrepreneur. There was somebody in the book who worked for the UN Foundation, and she started Nothing But Nets that helps people with, fight malaria, avoid malaria bugs. So it doesn't have to be somebody starting a company. It can be somebody starting anything. And I think it's almost more, I love the question because for me, it's more an attitude. It's an approach to life. I think you can even be entrepreneurial, whatever job you have. You can be a librarian and you can be entrepreneurial because you can start a really cool, after school program. So I almost think it's more of a way of thinking.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and that's one reason I really I am excited to have this conversation because I think you're right. It's a mindset, and it's not like, okay, I want to raise my kid to start a business. Like maybe, but I want them to have that mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset, where to me it's like they don't know how to do everything, but they're not afraid to learn. They're not afraid to try. They're not afraid to fail. Right? I mean, it seems like that's a
Exactly.
big part of entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'd be curious to hear, through your research and your experiences, what are some other sort of key traits or characteristics you found of entrepreneurs?
Well, you just hinted at one of the most important ones, which is not afraid to try, not afraid to fail. And I think if you really look at it, that could be the biggest difference between entrepreneurs and other people. If you're a doctor, if you're an architect, if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, you don't want to fail.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And if you work for some kinds of organizations, the government or some big companies, you don't want to fail either. They're very risk averse. You get more punishment for failing than you do praise for trying something bold. And so I think the key thing about entrepreneurs is they are not afraid to take risks and they're not afraid to fail. And I think that all goes back to how they were raised because none of these people were punished for failure. They were all taught that failure is how you learn and grow. I have always loved the Billie Jean King quote, we don't call it failure, we call it feedback.
Hmm.
And every single one of these people were raised like, okay, you didn't succeed this time. What are you going to do differently? How are you going to fix it? How are you going to change it? How are you going to improve? They weren't punished for screwing up. They had to fix something if they screwed up, but it was like, okay, what did you learn from this and what are you going to do differently? And so it's just this whole different attitude. And if you're not afraid to, if you're afraid to fail, you're not going to start something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's very, very true. Because you're going to fail over and over again when you're starting something, and maybe they're small failures, maybe they're bigger failures, but it's how you react to that, how you get through to the other side. And I think you're right. Of course, it starts with parenting, right? You have to learn these skills somewhere. You have to learn not to be afraid to fail. So when you're advising parents who are raising kids, say, okay, I can, teach them that it's okay to fail. Let's, we just need to try. That's the goal. How does like following their passion, that seems like a big part of it as well. Like understanding what your kids are into, kind of maybe starting there. How do you advise going from that to, sort of keeping trying, I guess would be, or perseverance, like, and what is that line also between perseverance and sort of losing interest? So I know I'm asking a lot here, but my basic question is like, my son plays piano, for example, and now he's tired of piano. So how
Okay.
much do you say, hey, let's keep working at it until you reach a certain level versus now try guitar, now try this, now try that, where you can be a jack of sort of all trades without being a master of any, you know what I mean? So how do you balance that? Maybe we'll start
So
there.
many good questions.
Yeah.
So first of all, regarding the piano, so our rule was always, if I paid for a camp for a week, you can't quit it because you don't like it in the first day. If I paid for a semester of music lessons, you can't quit it the first week because you don't like it the first. But if you don't like it at the end of the semester, fine, move on. I can tell you one really interesting story when Austin, my son, who's a musician, was in, I don't know, like third grade or something. We got him piano lessons and he didn't like it. And I was like, okay, I'll just write off the piano. And anyhow, then when he was about 13, it's a longer story, but he started writing music. And he was writing on the keyboard. And when he was in 10th grade, he found a piano teacher because he wanted to start, writing music on the piano. And he found a piano teacher who taught him to play chords and to play, the music in his head. And he started just sitting down, just playing music. And I realized it wasn't that he didn't like the piano. He didn't like the piano teacher, who was very rigid and who was, see that little black circle, play that note. And it just didn't work for him. So I think you have to see what sticks. I had no idea. I have, my older son played tennis. We don't play tennis. He was doing every sport. He was really good in Little League and he did soccer and basketball and everything, and it was just, tennis was something that just clicked to my amazement. We don't know anything about music. We don't know anything about writing music. It was just like a random thing he took at a summer camp. You just have to see, you have to keep an open mind and see what sparks your child. And if it's not piano, fine. The other sort of part of the answer to your question is, so many of these people had different passions growing up. They did one thing, they loved it, they were really into it. And then, 5 years later, they weren't anymore and they found something else. And that's okay too. When I look at the 70 people in the book, the ones who became artists, writing movies, acting, singing, writing music, that kind of thing, they found that when they were young and they kept at it. But the other, 60 of them, their passion growing up has nothing to do with what they do today. A huge number of them played sports at an elite level. None of them do anything with sports today. It doesn't matter what their passion is. I think the point is that you want them to find something they love, that they're going to pour themselves into, that because they love, they're going to work hard at it. And because they're going to work hard at something they chose, they're going to get good at it. And they're going to fail, and they're going to change, and they're going to improve, and they're going to strive, and they're going to, they're going to discover what grit's all about and the trade-off between hard work and results and all these different kinds of traits that you need if you're going to become an entrepreneur. Not necessarily that they're going to do anything in that thing, but just that they learn all the skills. I'm sure that was true for you, right? Growing up, you had something?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I was passionate about piano and then also tennis. And ironically, yeah. And don't play piano much these days, but I think, it's an important life lesson that we aren't cast in stone, like, because I'm not good at piano today doesn't mean that a week from now or a month from now or however long it takes, I can't be good at piano. Like, we can create our own path, right, in a lot of ways. And I think that's maybe part of the lesson as well through that. Yeah. Yeah. And then, I also noticed that a lot of people in your book played sports, competitively at a very high level. I mean, what do you think that's about?
I think it's exactly the same thing. It's grit and focus and determination and hard work. And it's all the traits that you need to become an entrepreneur. It was really interesting because when I was first getting organized on the book, and I had an agent and we were talking about this, and he said, so maybe, there's different things you learn with an individual sport and with a team sport. And maybe parents should get their kids to play both. And I just said, you've completely missed the point of the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that the parents should get their kids to play both. It's that they should see which one they like. And and whichever one they like, that's great. And if it's individual sports, if it's tennis or golf or diving or gymnastics or whatever, they'll learn certain kinds of skills. And if it's team sports, then they'll learn other kinds of skills. But in both of them, they're going to learn grit and focus and risk taking and failure and how to deal with failure. I mean, Roger Federer gave this amazing graduation commencement address at Dartmouth last month, and he said, and here's the greatest tennis player, of my lifetime, basically. And he said he lost half of every one of the points that he played in matches.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can't get discouraged because you don't hit the home run or you don't score the goal. You just have to say, I know what I did wrong. I'll do better next time.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I love that speech too. And it was so fascinating to hear that stat. It was like, yeah, I mean, he lost, just about half or something of his points and still won something like 80% of his matches,
Right.
80% of his matches. And, failure though, I think it doesn't feel good, right? Especially as kids, you don't want to fail. So how do you guide your kids through the feeling of failure, through, what failure is, while encouraging them to fail, to get through?
You praise them for effort and not for success, not for results. And you praise them for how hard they worked, and you praise them for how much better they are than they were the week before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or else you say, maybe you didn't work hard enough this week, and maybe you'll do it next week.
Yeah.
My older son, Elliot, fell in love with tennis when he was about 12. And if you played tennis, then like all the kids who end up top 100 in the country are already playing regional tournaments. And we don't play tennis. We don't know anything about it, but he just really wanted to keep going and get more lessons and play and play and play. And he just kept losing. He lost for years. And he just kept saying, I know what I did wrong. I'll beat him next time. And he fought his way up to 35 in the country in the juniors. And it's just, I think, and he's actually said, like, I didn't really like school that much. I didn't work that hard at school. I wasn't motivated in school. Everything I am today is because of tennis. Tennis is where I learned, grit and focus and determination and all that kind of stuff. So he just kept failing, but he was just like, I did better this time, and next time I'll win.
Yeah, that's inspiring, and I think you're right. I mean, it's also interesting and informative for us parents to keep in mind that school is important, but it's not the be all end all, right? You'll learn some things in school, but you'll learn a lot of things outside of school and through your experiences and through trying new things, et cetera. You don't fail as much in school, hopefully. That failure is not so good, but you learn things if you're learning a new language, like it takes time, it takes work, that sort of thing. And a big part, I think, is somewhere, Elliot picked up, okay, I want to play tennis, right? He found that bug somehow. And so how do you encourage parents to encourage curiosity in their kids? Because I think that's part of this whole thing is like, we want you to be trying new things, thinking about what you want to try and, that sort of thing. Like, is the role of curiosity pretty important there?
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's very important to be curious and to ask questions. And I think that you were asking me before about traits of entrepreneurs. Definitely curiosity is one of them, because they look at situations and say, why is it like this? Does it have to be like this? Could it be better? Could I make it better? Could I do it differently? Could I improve it? Could I fix it? Could I change it? And that's often how a business or an organization gets started. I think you get curious kids because you ask them questions and you try to get them to question things.
Yeah. No, that, and, so kids are, often naturally curious, but how do you encourage that further? I mean, to me, it's like maybe new experiences. It's, not, it's pushing them a little bit in terms of what their comfort zone is, instead of if they say, hey, I just want to stay home this weekend and not do anything. Say, well, we're going to go to the museum. Or we're going to go do this. We can do that, asking questions maybe. I mean, is that sort of along the lines of what you found?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. And just questioning them, what happened, what happened at school today that was good? What happened at school today that was bad? What happened at school today that you'd like to change? Just getting them to start thinking about stuff, never saying like, well, this is the way it is and that's the way it is, like because we do it that way and that's why,
Right.
letting them know it's good to question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What about the role of empathy? Is empathy important for raising entrepreneurial kids or being an entrepreneur, or is that it can be, it can't be, it's not, how relevant is it? I guess I would ask.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really surprised me. I mean, there were so many things that surprised me in the book. The last thing that you asked me about education, it surprised me how they were sort of all over the map. Like there was about a third of them that were like great students, breezed through Ivies, got master's degrees. There were about a third of them that were like, hated school, graduated from college, but were never happy. And there were about a third of them that just didn't go to college or dropped out, like just couldn't take it anymore. The same with empathy. I never would have expected that empathy and compassion would be a significant trait in all of these people, or would be a significant way that they were all raised. But when you think about it, it actually makes sense because, I mean, none of these kids were raised by parents who said, you want to start a company so you can make the most money possible. Like, I mean, people whose goal is to make the most money possible go to Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
These kids were raised like, how can you help people? How can you make the world a better place? How can you solve problems? How can you deliver clean water? How can you make a better product? How can you make a cleaning supply that's healthier, and environmental? It all has to do really with empathy and compassion. How can you fix problems? How can you help people? How can you make things better? And I think it's really important to not to think about yourself, but to think about, how you can make the world a better place, how you can improve things. And that's how people end up making good products or good organizations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's fascinating. I think you're right. It's not, I'm sure you're right. It's not parents saying, hey, you're going to make the most money possible being an entrepreneur, so that's why you need to do this. And I guess that would be another question. I mean, do you actively encourage entrepreneurship? Like, is that something you would recommend?
I mean, I didn't. I would say most of the parents in this book didn't. There were a small handful of future entrepreneurs who were always selling things. There were 2 out of the 70 who had lemonade stands.
Oh, okay.
But most of them were not selling things when they grew up. As I say, most of them just had a passion that they were working on really hard, that they were really motivated in. And their parents, supported that passion and supported their child's, spending time at something they loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask actually, how many of the people in the book were entrepreneurs as kids, and you said 2 or something, right? It
was very few. I mean, there were a few. Joel Holland, he was always like selling little things, and he lived near a golf course. He'd pick up golf balls that, had gone into the woods or whatever, and he'd clean them and put them in egg cartons and resell them. And he came home one day and said, "Mom, somebody called me an entrepreneur." He thought it was a swear word. He didn't know what he didn't know what the word meant.
Oh, wow.
Jonathan Neiman, who started Sweet Green. He was always selling things from the time he was little, and all the way through, middle school and high school, and always, but it was very unusual. It was very unusual.
Yeah, that's unexpected. That's unexpected.
And by the way, I would say that of the 70 people in this book, 5 have a sibling who is an entrepreneur, only 5, another sibling. And in all 5 of those cases, they also have a sibling who isn't. Everybody else in the book have siblings, if they weren't only children, have siblings who are not entrepreneurs. So the point is, you can't make your child an entrepreneur any more than you can make them a doctor, or an orchestra conductor. You just make them entrepreneurial. And not everyone's going to choose that path. I mean, it's hard. It's more hours in a day. It's more stress. It's certainly an uncertain income in the beginning. And a lot of people don't want that, and that's fine. So I wouldn't say, like, have your kids grow up saying, like, you have to be an entrepreneur,
Yeah. No, that's, I think the doctor example is a great one. Though with doctors, I think you're more likely to become a doctor if you have one of your parents is a doctor. Right. Did you find any correlation there with the people you interviewed, the entrepreneurs? Were their parents, any of them entrepreneurial?
A couple people had, again, Jonathan Neiman from Sweet Green. He said he co-founded it with 2 other people he met at Georgetown, and all 3 of them came from immigrant families whose parents were sort of scrappy entrepreneurs. But that's not common. Most of these people were not. Many of them had very traditional jobs. They were sort of doctors or lawyers. And a lot of them, the parents hadn't even gone to college. So it was kind of all over the map where the parents were.
Interesting. And going back to traits of entrepreneurs, how important do you think it is to be sort of fluent with numbers, or to be, understand financial, I mean, probably depends what you're doing, but just maybe understanding numbers is how I would put that. Is that an important trait, or did you find that not really?
I mean, I think it's really good to teach your kids financial literacy. If they're going to become an entrepreneur, they have to have a basic sense of their expenses and their revenues.
Right.
And most of these people did try to teach their kids financial literacy by having them work, to get an allowance to buy things. I mean, they weren't just buying their kids whatever their kids wanted. If you want something, you have to earn the money for it. So the kids were learning, the value of money, which clearly is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love the, you said, I think maybe that's what you said, there were two lemonade stand people in your book or something like that. But I love that idea. I've had success with my kids, and I know other parents have as well, with let's do a lemonade stand, because it's a real simple way to teach some financial literacy, right? Like, we're going to the store and it's going to cost this much to buy everything. And so we need to make that back, and you have to figure out what you want to charge. And if you charge $20 a cup, then no one's going to buy it, and, and start to understand market dynamics and things of that nature.
No, I love that. And I've actually been a judge for a sort of a contest of, little kids doing, little projects. And it's just like that, and selling bookmarks or whatever they're selling. And it's, I love that sort of thing. I think it's really good for kids. I don't think it necessarily makes every one of them who does that an entrepreneur.
Right.
But it's certainly a fun and useful thing to do, and it may spark some.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. And again, it's like sort of a fun thing for kids to do anyway. So it's,
Right.
regardless of
It's
if
a
they're,
fun thing and it's a fun, and they get a lot of pride out of it,
yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think your book is particularly relevant now. It feels like there's more of an entrepreneurial spirit in our world. It seems in some ways that it's more important than ever to be able to be an entrepreneur, not necessarily, start your own business. But, do you see that as well? And like, why is that happening? If you do see that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I've seen just in the last week or so, I saw something that a new survey said, like for the first time, like half of all young people say they want to have their own business. They want to work for themselves. I don't know. I think the whole maybe COVID and not wanting to go into an office and or not wanting to, listen to what somebody else has to say. No, I think it's great. It wasn't that way when I was growing up.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think it's wonderful, and I mean, part of what's so important to me about the book is people, my age who grew up where you had to follow this path, right? You had to do well in all your subjects, and you had to have a couple interesting extracurricular activities, and you had to get into a good college, and you had to do well in your, all your classes, and you had to graduate from that college, and then maybe you had to go on and get an MBA or a law degree or something, and then you would get into a business, and you could keep that business for, many, many years. And I mean, that may work for some kids, but that's definitely not where most kids' heads are today. And I want to let parents know, like, that's okay.
Hmm.
Like, they don't have to follow that path. It's a whole new world out there. Let them explore, let them go. I started out by saying, you asked me, like, what was the main thing parents did? And I said, they all believed in their child. And when I talk to groups about this, everyone says, "Oh, come on, Margot, every parent believes in their child." And I'm like, "No, every parent loves their child. Every parent wants their child to be happy and to be successful. But most parents don't actually believe in their child. Most parents would say, stop writing music and go study your biology. Stop playing that video game and go study your history. Stop playing tennis and go study literature. And why? Like, what's more important in their life, that they've actually gotten really, really good at something they love, or that they, have straight A's in high school? And when parents say, stop spending so much time on the thing you love and go study, what they're telling their child is, I don't really believe that if you do the thing you love, that you can make a living. I don't really believe you can be successful at that thing you say you love. And so, don't get too involved in it. Work to get into a good college. Make sure you have a good degree so when your project fails, you'll have something to fall back on. Well, that doesn't tell a child you believe in them.
Hmm. That's very true. Though it feels like there's it's a balance, though, and maybe this is me not believing in my kids. Sorry if you're listening, future kids. But in terms of a child might want to play piano for all day or something, and they're neglecting their schoolwork, and they're we're saying a younger child here, one who's maybe in middle school or something like that, and they won't know the impact of neglecting their schoolwork, right? Maybe then they're a little behind in high school, and maybe they're done with piano in high school, but they don't, academically they're behind. I mean,
Or maybe they can get into a good music school because they really have a gift.
so
Or,
that's more the attitude you would say.
or maybe, they're not going to become a world-class pianist, but they've really gotten into music. And so maybe they go to college, and study music industry, or music therapy, or something, that's more in line with the thing they love.
So you think it's a lot, you'd advocate more for encouraging, trying, having grit, being able to fail and keeping something up versus saying, okay, have this balance where you're working on, school is part of your job. You have to do well in school. I know you're not saying like let your kid drop out or something necessarily in, elementary or middle school or early, but it does. I mean, I just want to understand that a little better in terms of that line of encouraging your kids. Whereas if they might not like school, they still have to go to school. You know what I mean? Like,
but why don't they like school?
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's so important. And so many of the entrepreneurs in this book were not happy in school, and their parents ended up changing them into a different school. Maybe that kind of school just doesn't work for them, or maybe they're being kind of bullied at that school, or maybe the teachers in that school just don't appreciate getting asked so many questions. And so I think it's hard. You're asking me really hard questions, Will. I mean, I think that's like the hardest thing about raising kids is knowing where to draw the line and knowing when to push and knowing when not to. But I would say if your kid is not thriving in school, you really need to consider changing schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's a really profound statement. I think it's not necessarily just push through. It's asking the question and understanding why don't they like it, and it can be social, but to your point, it can also just be the style of school. There's a lot of different schools now where there's outside schools where you're outside all day. There's schools where they encourage more free learning and more questions and things like that, right?
Right. And so I would say if your kid, if it's just not working, that school, you should really look at it and say like, gee, I wonder if we can find a place that does work for you better.
Yeah.
One of the people in the book, Benny Blanco, who's ended up writing, 20 number one hits for people, music hits. His mom told me when he was in kindergarten, the teacher would call her every week and say, Benny won't sit in the circle. And she'd say, so? But like most parents wouldn't say so. They would say, Benny, you have to sit in the circle. And she was like, so he won't sit in a circle. Who cares? But not every mom is so relaxed. It's not easy to know where that line is.
Yeah. No, that's a funny anecdote. And did she believe in his songwriting, or how did that?
Yeah.
Okay. From the start,
Yeah. So all his teachers found him annoying, and then when he was, I think, like in ninth grade or something, she got him some music lessons, and the guy said he was the most talented kid he'd had in 20 years. And by the time he was like in a junior in high school, he was taking the bus. He lived in DC. He was taking the bus up to New York on weekends to work with, rappers and stuff. And, so yeah. And he ended up not going to college, and but he teaches at NYU's music department now because he's so amazing.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I'd be curious with your own kids, at what point you saw that they were going to be entrepreneurs in their own way, and how you encourage that.
I didn't. It didn't, sort of cross my mind. We always knew Austin would do something in music. I mean, from the time he was 13, he wrote 300 songs before he graduated from high school. I mean, like this is a kid that music was just pouring out of him. I mean, I always told him it's hard to become a pop star, but I always knew he would do something in music, and I didn't know what exactly. So he ended up, going to a university as a composition major and studying like every aspect of music. So, I mean, he can do anything. He can, score music. He can, write movie themes. I mean, he can write jingles. But he's also, his band is doing really, really well. Magic Giant. So, super exciting. And they're opening for One Republic next month, which was like such a a dream of his. So that's cool. But
That's awesome. Yeah. So dads, if
you
you're listening, just put on Magic Giant right now and you can check out his music. And yeah, I like that. I like that.
and Elliot, I mean, I had no idea what he would do. I couldn't
And did that
imagine.
worry you? Sorry, just to interject. Like when you had no idea, like, were you concerned? Like, how's he going to make a living? What's he going to,
Yeah, no, I thought, the only thing I could think of that he might want, I knew he would never want a desk job. And I thought, he was so articulate and so good at talking to people and so sort of charming and he knew everything about every sports and different kind of sport. And I thought, maybe he'll be like a sports announcer on TV. I couldn't think of anything else. But then when he went off to college, he met somebody who his RA in his dorm who said, let's make T-shirts and try to sell them. And Elliot was like, what? This is so amazing. And then he ended up dropping out after 2.5 years, came back to work with my husband who had just started his company. And my dad had been a professor, so I was sort of shocked at the idea that my son might not graduate from college. And I said, I didn't want him not to go back, but I didn't want to be the jerk saying so. So I said, okay, like you don't have to go back unless, unless you can sell like $1 million worth of ads, because it was a brand new company, and of course he sold $1 million worth of ads. So I was screwed.
Right. Well, but that path ended up being the right path for him, right? I mean,
right. And then he, what's really interesting for me is that, a year and a half after he was out, but 1 month before he would have graduated from college, he invited 18 young entrepreneurs for a ski weekend in Utah, just because he wanted to meet young entrepreneurs and see how they'd gotten started and see what it was like and just learn from them. And it was an amazing group. Blake Makowski from Tom's and just a lot of amazing people. And he wasn't going to do it again. It was just going to be a one-off. And then they all said, oh my God, we love this. You have to, do it again. And we want to invite 5 friends. And so that's how he ended up starting his organization. So you never know. I mean, he didn't invite them because he wanted to start a conference series. He invited them just because he wanted a one-off opportunity to, meet people. So you explore, you see, and the amazing thing is it was a month before he would have graduated. And if he'd stayed in college, not studying classes that didn't interest him, the moment would have passed him by. I mean, it became so amazing because it was the first time young entrepreneurs had ever gathered together. Sam Altman from ChatGPT was, and the College Humor guys. I mean, it was a really cool group of people. And, it was because of the timing. And that was the first time that these, 25-year-olds had gathered together. And so, I mean, I think that's another really important lesson for parents is you never know what's going to lead to something. You never know. Like I was originally appalled that he was dropping out of college, but turned out to be the best thing ever. Mm-hmm. So,
No, that's a good lesson. And it's, thank you for sharing that. It's not easy to keep in mind, certainly, when you're going through it, I'm sure. And I think part of it is expectations you have, you not you personally now, but just in general, as parents, we can have expectations for our kids. Like I expect that they'll do X, Y, or Z. And, it comes out of a place of love. Like right. You said, every parent wants to have loving kids, wants to have successful kids, but it's not something that we can define, right? Like success has a lot of meanings. And for a parent, we can't tell our kid, hey, you're going to be a doctor. I mean, maybe a generation ago or 2 generations ago, that was somewhat more common, but now kids push back and you want them to follow their passion. And, figure out, through their curiosity, what they want to be doing, where they want to be spending their time.
No, I can't tell you how much I agree with that. And like, I always think about the college admissions scandal. Do you remember that from a couple of years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was saying, oh, that's, these super rich parents, who were like bribing people to get their kids in. And, these kids ended up with so much more than, kids who don't come from super rich families. And to me, it was the opposite. To me, these kids had parents who said, if you don't follow this path, you can't be successful. And you can't be successful unless you go to this school. But if this school knew the real you, they wouldn't want you. So we have to pretend that you're somebody other than what you are. We have to pretend that you can do things you can't do, because otherwise you can't get into this school and you can't be a success in life. I can't imagine a worse message to tell your child, to communicate to your child. Instead of saying, you're probably not going to go to this school. They're not going to get who you are. We're going to find a school who appreciates you because you're amazing.
Absolutely. I agree. 100%. I think that is the core message from that whole scandal that I got too, is like, this is horrible for the kids, and to your point, it's about believing in them and, or in this case, not believing in them or trying to choose a path for them. And I think to your point and the point in your book, which you make really, really well, is that's not our job as parents to give them the path, dad's path. It's to let them find their path and encourage it, as parents, and to let them fail through that path and develop some grit and, not being afraid of that failure. And I mean, that's a big part of life. And whether you're an entrepreneur, as when you grow up as a career, you choose that as a career, or whether you're working for a big company and you're entrepreneurial in that company, or you aren't entrepreneurial at all, those are still really, really important lessons. I mean, that's one thing I really got out of the book that I enjoyed.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, no, it's just so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Margot. I really appreciate you joining us today. Fascinating conversation. It's a really well-written book, and again, also really easy to read, just because it has these short little vignettes and with great lessons in them. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much, Will. I really enjoyed our conversation.
That's great. And then you can check it out. Check her website out, raisinganentrepreneur.com.
Entrepreneur.
There's the book. Yep. Raising an Entrepreneur. And again, I couldn't recommend it more. And Margot, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Will. It was great.
Likewise.